This is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3.
Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for good programming. I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station and listen. It's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Howdy. It's Thursday, April 10th. Okay? Now that we've oriented ourselves, there's a news story that isn't the big news story of the day, but it stopped me in my tracks. You know how the Trump administration has been going after universities. Northwestern University is one of the latest, where they claim that these universities are promoting anti-Semitism. Therefore, they are justified in cutting off all federal funding and grants. It is absolutely a way to make bastions of free speech capitulate and quake in fear. Because, Harvard, Columbia, Northwestern, the list goes on and on and on. You think they're all so guilty of anti-Semitism? No, it's a ruse. Like with everything Trump does, he decides what he wants to do, who he wants to hurt, who he wants to threaten and minimize, and then he finds an excuse to do it. Let's see. Well, I know. We'll accuse them all of anti-Semitism. That's bad enough. The chancellor of the University of Illinois at Chicago was the moderator when I went to that Tom Skilling presentation a week ago Wednesday on climate change. She said that at the University of Illinois at Chicago, they actually have formed a task force where when it comes to science and science research, they're trying to figure out what is the most important research they're doing. Because if they have federal funds cut off, as they're expecting to at some point, they know that they might be able to make some of it up with philanthropy, with rich people giving them money to make up for it. But it won't be the equivalent of the federal money they're getting. So they are actually having meetings where they are looking at all the research they are doing, all the science-based research they are doing, and trying to figure out if the money runs out, if the money is cut off, what do they have to take as their highest priority going forward? So in other words, whatever money they can get, they will put it toward preserving certain research that they're doing now. They can't do all of it. But she said, for certain areas of research, part of the reason why the United States has always led everybody, not just politically, but economically, is because we spend so much money on research and we are always at the cutting edge. She said there are some areas of research that if we ignore them for 3 or 4 years, she said we will be so far behind the rest of the world that we will never catch up. So they are trying to identify the most vital areas to preserve, assuming they're going to lose their funding. Well, they now have, as of today, they have something else to worry about. The Wall Street Journal is reporting exclusively. You know how they went after Columbia? And they said they were cutting out their $400 million Columbia was getting from the government was going to stop ASAP. Columbia's president, at least publicly, went along with a lot of their demands. But privately, she told people that she was going to slow walk it, instituting whatever it is they'd agreed to. And somebody who she confided that to ratted her out to far-right media. And they started going after her. Oh, she's not going to she's not really doing it. She said she's going to slow walk it. And there was so much heat that came to bear on her that she was like, you know what? Thank you very much. I'm moving on from the presidency of the university in general. I'm going back to the medical area where I came from, and I'm staying there. Well, Trump administration wants to install federal oversight of Columbia University. In an unusual move, the government is aiming to legally bind the school to changes as they negotiate over federal funding. Der Fuhrer wants to have his person at Columbia, making sure those radical lefties do what he tells them to do. He doesn't want just lip service like, yes, sir, and then they go off and do their own thing. No. He wants somebody there looking over their shoulder. The move toward authoritarianism just ramped up again. I don't know. I hope this gets the attention it deserves. I realize that everybody's like, tariffs, no tariffs, tariffs, no tariffs. And by the way, the stock market is tanking again today. It was bad enough when he accused all these universities falsely of anti-Semitism. We're going to cut off your funds. It was just a way to scare them, to get them to capitulate, because, universities are sometimes where protests begin. We can't have that. Now, not only is a lot of Columbia's funding on the line, but the Trump administration wants to have oversight. They want a sort of like, how when police departments are found to be guilty of wrongdoing and the government imposes, it's called a consent decree, where they have to, in a certain amount of time, they have to make a certain number of changes, which the Chicago Police Department has been operating under and working apparently not really very hard toward achieving those goals, but I digress. They want something like that for Columbia, where there's a federal watchdog that can assess, have they taken the steps to curtail campus speech? Because, somebody might say something anti-Semitic. We can't have that. Of course, they're more likely to say something anti-Trump, and we really can't have that either now, can we? Scary stuff. This is, again, exclusively in the Wall Street Journal. I hope somebody else picks this up and starts running with it, because this is really scary stuff. The White House wants to watch over. So there were tariffs, there were no tariffs. The stock market went down, the stock market came up, the stock market has gone down again today. And that's what a lot of people are focused on. But the White House also announced on the subject of tariffs, apparently they can't do math. I know that shocks you because Donald Trump is a genius, but apparently nobody at the White House can do math, because they announced yesterday when they were pausing the other tariffs that the tariffs on China were going to go up to 125%. 125%. And you know what they say today? Oh, wait. Oh, apparently we didn't carry the 4. Oh, sorry, my bad. The tariffs on China, they've recalculated. They're actually 145%. 145%. I wonder how Elon's going to feel about that. Because have you also heard the talk today that Trump's going to think about whether or not certain companies should be exempt. Certain companies should be exempted from this high tariff on China. And asked by a reporter how he was going to determine which companies were going to be exempted, he said he was going to do it instinctively. Yeah, just instinctively. I'm just going to know instinctively who to exempt. It will have nothing to do with how much money they donate to my campaign or my PACs or how much business they give to my hotels and golf courses. It's not going to have anything to do with that. It's just going to be instinctive. I'm just going to know. When the time comes, I'm just going to know. Interesting. That's some objective criteria. Cleansing breaths. Not supposed to be this crazy this Thursday. Not supposed to be. And the real fear, as I've said all week long, is uncertainty. When you have a president who's up one day and down the next, and you own a business, how are you supposed to plan for the future? That business owner who was interviewed on CNN the other day, she does a lot of business with China. When she heard about this potential trade war, she started looking into sourcing some of her stuff from Cambodia. And then suddenly Cambodia was on the list. And now Cambodia's off the list. But she said, he says he's pausing the tariffs for 90 days. But what happens at the end of 90 days? What happens if somebody ticks him off 3 days from now? You know Donald Trump. I know Donald Trump. If Cambodia said or did something over the weekend, this coming weekend, that made Trump mad, you think he wouldn't add Cambodia to the list with China? Come on, we know this guy. And she's absolutely right. This kind of capriciousness leaves businesses unable to plan. And as far as moving manufacturing back to the United States, she said, even if I could find some place to assemble these handbags that I make, which I can't, even if I could find that kind of a facility, she said, all the things that go into the bags I make come from overseas because that's where they're available. So this idea that somehow he's a strong man and tariffs are going to, A, bring in more money, and B, bring back manufacturing, both of those are very, very much untrue. They ain't happening, kids. The former Treasury Secretary has said in an interview with The Guardian U.S. that U.S. tariffs on China, these are the ones still in place, U.S. tariffs on China is the worst self-inflicted wound by any successful measure of an economy or business. Yeah. Worst self-inflicted wound ever on a successful economy. Because don't forget, kids, you may have thought inflation was too high and the cost of eggs were too much. By the way, how's that working out for you? But the economy was in good shape. Remember when I think it was The Economist said that our economy was the envy of the world? Not anymore, kids. As we seem to stumble from one crisis to another. By the way, I told you this was going to happen. I know a lot of people held out hope that somehow these budget votes would go another way. But they have successfully gotten together enough members of Congress to pass the measure that allows them to do the budget in a way that only requires a simple majority in the House and a simple majority in the Senate to pass it. Ordinarily, a normal budget done through the normal process would require a 2/3 vote in the Senate. But procedurally, there are ways to get around that, and that has now happened. There were a lot of Republicans who held out, and USA Today is reporting that there was a lot of arm twisting to get Republicans to sign on, but they did. So let's keep an eye on what actually happens to Medicaid. Donald Trump says repeatedly that not just Medicare and Social Security, but also Medicaid, he's going to protect it. Nobody seems to think that's really going to happen. And, you know, what does that mean, he's going to protect it? Because remember, without tapping into the way checks are sent, remember when Elon wanted to eliminate the phone workers who a lot of elderly relied on to figure out what their benefits were, how they needed to apply? Elon Musk wanted to get rid of all the people who man the phones, which would mean that every elderly person would have to go in person to a Social Security office. And, oh, by the way, they were planning to cut the number of offices. And if you don't think that was done to discourage anybody from sticking with the process long enough to apply and start getting Social Security, if you think that wasn't a backdoor cut, you are not looking at the big picture here, kids. There was so much anger over this. Even AARP woke up and weighed in. They haven't been really doing a whole lot, in my humble opinion, but what do I know? And they've backed off of that. They've decided that, oh, yeah, maybe those telephone people need to stay. Okay. We'll keep them around, at least until everybody stops paying attention. We'll keep them along. We'll keep them on until then. I told you that Crockett's Corner was also going to share space with Greg Kazar's Corner. He's another Democratic congressperson from Texas. He represents part of the Austin, Texas area. He was talking about Elon Musk. He was talking about Elon Musk, and he did. This is going to shock you. Hold on. He did not have a lot of good to say. He is chair of the House Progressive Caucus. He was at a Capitol press conference earlier today, and I think you want to hear this. Lady B, go ahead and play that.
Here's the big news that people across the country haven't heard but need to know. 50 days from today, Donald Trump must, by law, fire Elon Musk. Last night, 76 House Democrats sent a clear message to President Trump. The clock is ticking. Since the beginning of this administration, Trump and Musk have exploited Musk's designation as a so-called special government employee to allow Musk to receive over $8 million a day in federal government contracts and subsidies while ignoring our conflict of interest rules, and while funneling more and more money to himself and to his companies. But the law is crystal clear. A special government employee like Musk must leave the federal government after 130 days. That means that Musk must leave office by May 30th. That means that 50 days from today, Donald Trump must fire Musk. 50 days from today, Musk's reign of terror must end. And that day cannot come soon enough. We would be here for hours if I tried to recount every single one of Musk's illegal actions or abuses or attacks on working Americans, but let me give you just a few. In his 80 days in power, Elon Musk has fired more veterans from the federal government than anyone else in history. Elon Musk has fired independent watchdogs that were investigating his own companies for corruption and for breaking the law. Elon Musk called Social Security a Ponzi scheme, tried to shut down the phone lines that seniors use to get their checks. They degraded the system so much that we were being warned that it was on the verge of crashing and collapse. Elon Musk demanded access to Americans' most sensitive and private medical records and tax information. Elon Musk tried to steer billions of dollars of government contracts towards his own companies while already collecting $8 million a day from the federal government. Elon Musk fired nuclear safety workers, air traffic controllers, and people trying to combat ongoing disease outbreaks. This must end. If we're up to the American people, I think Elon Musk would be fired tomorrow. But a typical government employee would have been gone weeks and weeks ago. A typical government employee would have been held accountable for these crimes and for this corruption. But Musk relies on his so-called special government employee status. That gravy train runs out in 50 days.
Well, we hope it does. We hope it does. I really do think Donald Trump would like Elon to go back to running his companies full time. But he loves Elon's money so much that he's not going to be the one to pull the trigger. If you don't think that Politico article from earlier that said, the Trump team is starting to talk about how Elon's going to transition away from government, that, my friends, was a trial balloon to see whether or not Elon would react. And apparently he did, and he was not happy. He was not happy. He is not ready to leave his shadow presidency. He wants to continue his fight with Peter Navarro. And you know what? The fact that Donald is now having to deal with this, it doesn't break my heart. It doesn't break my heart. But the bromance is strained. And meanwhile, as I mentioned briefly yesterday, Yusha Vance gave an interview to some European publication, and she said J.D. Vance is lonely. Clearly, she didn't mean he misses her, but he doesn't, I guess he's being sidelined. You know, when you've got an egomaniac who is trying to placate another egomaniac, that doesn't leave a lot of room for J.D. Vance. It really doesn't. Peter Thiel was a big supporter of J.D. Vance, and so originally was Elon Musk, but I am not so sure that Musk wants the competition either. Poor J.D. Vance. If he weren't such a mean, horrible, awful person, I'd feel badly for him. Lady B is opening up the phone lines. We're going to take your calls and read your texts right after this.
If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Amazon, or HeartlandSignal.com. Just search for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Hey Progressives, it's Richard Chu, host of Chu's Views, weekdays from 6 to 8 a.m. here on WCPT. I want to let you know that one of our leading progressive voices, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, will be my guest the first Friday of every month at 7:30 a.m.
In this moment, we are not going to surrender our humanity. And that's really what I believe the extremism in this country would like for us to do.
Mayor Brandon Johnson, the first Friday of every month on Chu's Views on WCPT.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 a.m., WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Want to join the conversation?
I'm going to say exactly what I think here.
Got something to say?
Everyone needs to hear what I got to say.
Call Joan now at 773-763-9278 and join the conversation. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820.
I've gotten some interesting texts. Zajac texted in, too bad we can't show up to vote like we do for protests. I bet the people who showed up for those protests were voters, because if you stayed home in this last really important election, you probably don't care enough to get out and demonstrate. I can't imagine that. And somebody also said, do you know who the designated survivor is? You know, just in case. And my feeling is anybody but Mike Johnson. I don't think J.D. Vance would be much of an improvement over Trump, but I think Mike Johnson, that would be like giving the presidency to Lindsey Graham. He would be the least powerful president in history because he would just do what everybody tells him to do. And somebody else, Fred from Wicker Park, commented on the fact that Donald Trump said that he was going to decide which companies should be exempted from the China tariffs. He was going to do it instinctively. And Fred texted in, instinctively, huh? At least Reagan used an astrologer. Ronald Reagan, for those of you who are too young to remember, well, it was actually Nancy Reagan, but, you know, Ronald went along with her. Nancy Reagan had an astrologer who she really believed in and would consult all the time. And if the astrologer said, like, this is a bad time for the two of you to travel, I mean, she would go to Ronald Reagan if he had a trip planned and say, we have to move it. We have to move it. It's a bad time to travel. Now, admittedly, sometimes when you go through a very scary time, you're looking for somebody who can give you some advice, give you a leg up. And I think after Ronald Reagan was shot, I think that had a profound effect on Nancy Reagan. And, you know, and if she thought an astrologer would keep him safe, try to make him avoid the things that would put him in danger, so be it. She didn't care if people laughed at her. Let's go to the phone lines. Greg from Lake in the Hills is on the line. Hi, Greg.
Hey, Joan, how are you?
Pretty good so far.
Hey, a couple things. Yesterday, I texted, and I think you've been talking about different people who might be good candidates from the Democratic side. And one of the people that I really have liked, and I'm not sure if you've come across him, but his name is, he's a Texas state senator. His name is James Tellerico.
I've heard the name, but I'm not too familiar with him.
Yeah, I don't know if you still have the text from yesterday, or I could send it to you again. But this guy is really good, and the way I would describe him is he's like Pete Buttigieg, who I firmly and wholeheartedly admire. I mean, the guy is a real, Pete Buttigieg is I think most people would agree he's very professional in how he presents himself, how his composure when he's speaking, and how he's not afraid to speak on difficult topics. This guy, I think he's in the same category. And, I'm sure he's not going to be forgotten by history. This guy is really sharp. But anyway, the other reason that I was calling in is I've mentioned this several times, and I've kind of tried to be humorous in a way and say that, well, we know now that the deep state never existed. Okay, and I've said that before when I called in by you, but, darn it, I mean, this is what I've been banking on all along, that, these are the people who are there, who are living, they're living, in their lives are all but laying back and monitoring things. And then when the time is right or wrong, as the case may be, or more appropriate, they snap into action. And they do everything they can to right the ship. and take down this people who are these people are overthrowing our government. I don't care what anybody says.
Well, remember, there were people like that in Trump's first administration, and it was just announced, I can't remember if it was last night or this morning, that he's going after two of them. Miles Taylor, I think he was in Homeland Security, and he wrote an op-ed that the New York Times published, and it was signed anonymous. And the op-ed said, you should know that there are people in the Trump administration who are fighting every day to try to rein in his worst impulses. And you should know that we are there and we are fighting in our own way. That was Miles Taylor. And Chris Krebs, I think, worked in cybersecurity. And Donald Trump is now going after both of them. He's going to go after both of them. He wants the DOJ to go after them. And I'm not sure if it's treason he wants to charge them with, but it's something pretty severe. So I don't know if we're going to find that same kind of resistance, because Trump learned his lesson. It doesn't matter if you're an expert on national security if you are not blindly loyal to Trump. And if you're blindly loyal to Trump, you don't have to have any expertise in any area. That's what. For sure. But the deep state is bigger than our country. And it's bigger than any department. This is made up of people that are from. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's like its own army of people that are there, and their whole purpose. They're like they're lying in wait, and they're not real obvious people that you would see. I mean, these are the people that Tom Clancy used to write about. When there's a problem somewhere in the world, they go there. Okay, that's CIA level, but FBI level, which is the people who take care of the, our country here. Like for example, the guy who was the head of the FBI, he had a 10-year term. He left. He should never have left that post, in my opinion. He just should never have left. That's what do they call? They give up in advance or whatever. That was obey
wrong.
In advance. And I wonder why he did that. And I sometimes if you retire, you get a better retirement package than if you are fired. And I have to believe, he obviously knew if he didn't quit on his own, he was going to be fired, even though he had been appointed by Trump. But that's another question. And I'm sure he did whatever he felt was best for his family.
Did you see that thing about Kash Patel? He's now basically living in Las Vegas, Nevada. Did you hear that?
Oh, he said, even when they were confirming him, he said that he was going to spend most of his time in Las Vegas. Yep, Purdue. Yeah. And then there's Doug Burgum, who apparently berates his interns because they're supposed to bring him warm chocolate chip cookies. And if they're not warm and if they don't taste right, he sends them back to give him different chocolate chip cookies. That was in the Atlantic. We've got the best people.
It was great that Rachel brought up the other night. I think it was Rachel Maddow, and she brought up finally that kind of old story about Kristi Noem from North Dakota, and her and Corey Lewandowski were having an affair. I don't know. I thought she was married. I might be wrong. And to me, it doesn't matter. But because it matters to who? The Christians and everything out there. But if she's a married woman, which I think she was at the time. And she
Who
was
were we talking about? I didn't catch the name you said. The woman?
Kristi Noem.
Kristi Noem. Yeah, I don't know about her. I know Hope Hicks dated Lewandowski for a while, but that's the only one I know.
He's another one of these guys. Yeah, he's like a Hexeth guy, and the guy I worry about more than anything, and I'll let you go after this, but if I could, is what's his name? General Flynn, Michael Flynn. The guy who was let go of them from the military because they didn't like him. And he's out there. He's back in the government, and Trump brought him back in. Nobody's hearing this. I sent you an article about that. He's back in power now again, and he's with the Christian nationalists, and he's one of the top people who's in this fighting this patriotic war, Christian war, and they want the Middle East and everything for this rapture and everything. He's one of these guys that he scares me. You know.
Yeah,
anyway, I'll let you go because I know you got a lot of callers, and I really appreciate you taking my call. Sure. And I'm saying hi to Jim and Dave and everybody else out there.
I will do that. Let's go real quick to Jim, who is on the line from Chicago. Hey, Jim, how are you today?
Hi, Joan. I caught a Canadian woman at PBS this morning. She was held by ICE for 6 weeks without charges. She said there were hundreds of women in this facility, and the only reason she could get out was she had some political muscle. And they finally got to a guard. She said, well, if I promise to pay my airfare home, will you release me? They said, okay. Well, but she was given a condition. You cannot come back to the United States for 5 years. And what she gleaned from this experience was she noticed that it was a prison, that it was a private prison, and that they had to fill these prisons up, and these guards had to justify their salaries. And we are paying, taxpayers are paying for this through the nose. They're getting grants, so we're taking the grants away from colleges, but they're getting grants. And I think Betsy DeVos's brother, I think he might be running he loves to run these prisons. I don't know. I don't want to accuse him because I'm not sure who it is. But it was absolutely it's something I would never see in my life. But this is what's going on. So we don't know where these people are headed. We don't know if these people are. ICE isn't investigated. I haven't heard any investigation on ICE or what their character references are that they hire these ICE people. But anyway, she said it was absolutely deplorable. And there are hundreds of women in this facility, and she said the conditions were just unbelievable. Now, this is the United States of America, Joe, but this is just I don't know, dear God in heaven, I don't know if this is going to be how long you can get away with this, or if the Supreme Court, who's in his pocket, is going to allow people to be picked up off the street and put in these private prisons because they have to fill them, Joe, to justify these federal contracts. So that's what we're up against there.
Yeah,
so it
and
was really
the people who behind private prisons are big Republican donors in a lot of cases because they know, Republicans are going to make their business flourish. Jim, I got to get to a break. Thank you so much for the call. I know you do. Yeah, you're welcome, Joan. Thank you. And real quick, before we go to break, some people like to text in with their thoughts on the topic of the day, and some people just want to rag on me. You sound so arrogant when you speak. Do you not realize all your gaslighting, along with the rest of the Democrats, nobody's buying anything you say. You won't even have a radio show by the end of this year. The next 8 years are going to be for J.D. Vance. We're paying people to vote. And I say to this person what I say to most people, gosh, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for caring enough to text in. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with more after this.
There's no excuse to miss Joan Esposito.
It's number one on my stereo.
Live, local, and progressive. You can listen to her daily at WCPT820.com on your computer or phone.
WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter.
Don't turn that dial. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now.
A fair balance where the facts come out.
On WCPT 820.
We are taking your texts and calls. Let's right now go to Myrna, who's calling in from Chicago. Hey, Myrna, how are you?
Hi, Joan. Well, I have two things, but this is even more important. I know people are getting paid to protest and show
No,
up
they're
and
not.
stuff like that.
That is not true. That is misinformation, Myrna. People are not getting paid. Lady B, let's move on. Now let's go to our good friend Ed, who is calling in from Palos Park. Hey, Ed.
Yeah, hi, Joan. I have a couple of comments here. Not too long ago, Trump fired those 3 national security members upon the advice of the lunatic.
Laura Loomer. I don't think they're
Loomer.
loyal enough to you, Mr. Trump. They're not loyal enough to you. You should get rid of them. Okay, Laura, your word's good enough for me.
Yes. And watching a Malcolm Nance podcast, he made reference to that situation, and he thinks there's more to that firing than meets the eye. So I was doing some thinking, and recently there's talk of intertrading, what's been going on here with the market going up and down. And I'm wondering if those national security members, if they had some knowledge of, what was going to be coming. So, you can't be sure, but it's just very odd that, she shows up and takes his advice and he fires him. And she was at his press conference today, and he made reference to her for her to validate something that was said. And he says, "How about it, Laura? Is it?" And she said, "Oh yeah," and she was talking back to him. So how can you have somebody like that at a press conference? I mean, she's been a proven lunatic, barred from various venues.
Well, she was thrown off for a while when he was campaigning. She was on the Trump official plane. And I think it was never clear how it happened, but it sounded like Susie Wiles, who was in charge, who was the campaign manager, decided that she was not helping the cause, that even people on the right found her too much to take and too far right and too crazy. And there was one appearance where she flew in on the Trump plane, and then all of a sudden the Trump plane left that town without her. And Susie Wiles is believed to have been the reason why that happened.
Well, she's hanging around again. So
yes, she is.
And,
where's Susie Wiles now?
Oh, yeah. And I don't hear anything as of late about Signalgate. Now, is that going to be a closed issue? There's going to be no fighting to have an investigation or whatever. I mean, that's
a really interesting observation, and I can't tell you that I've got an answer for you on that, because I mean, in Trump world, as you know, news stories come and go very quickly, and the tariffs that were and then weren't are sucking up a lot of oxygen in the room. So I guess we are just going to have to wait and see if anybody pursues anything to do with that.
Absolutely. Well, I hope it's picked up again, because they should not be allowed to get away with that. I mean, it's worst breach in the history of the country, really, when that's totally analyzed. Yes. So,
well, thank you for the call. I gotta try to squeeze in some other callers here. Thank you. Let's go to Hyde Park. Our good friend Earl is on the line. Hey, Earl.
Hey, Joan, thank you for taking my call. Interesting conversations today.
Thank you.
But the reason why I call is I'm going to start calling the conservatives that elect Donald Trump peanuts from the cartoon of the same name. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how often Linus
tried to.
Lucy, she always pulls that football out from under him.
Yes, she does.
And it doesn't matter how often the Republican Party gives the voters that vote for them a line of garbage, the same old line of garbage, cutting taxes and all this other stuff. We're going to bring all these jobs back. And, we got all of these voters who are illegal voters that are not supposed to be voting. And they've been trying for I don't know how many years trying to find these so-called voter fraud situations. But from now on, as far as I'm concerned, it's like the cartoon Peanuts, and they are lying us that no matter how often they plead with Lucy, and Lucy reassures them that everything is going to be all right, she's going to snatch that football away.
Yes, she is.
And they're getting ready to snatch Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, you name it. Like you said at the beginning of the program, our financing, our colleges for innovative studies, they're doing everything to cripple our future for short-term gains for the rich and powerful right now. And they don't realize that every time they let Republicans in a recession, is almost guaranteed because they're going to do something stupid with the economy.
Yeah.
8 recessions that we've had in our lifetime, 7 of them have been caused by the Republican Party. And they keep voting them in. We keep going through the recessions, and the Democrats have to come in and clean up the mess and get blamed for the mess. And they vote them back in again.
I know. Rinse, repeat. I've seen it happen just like you describe, over and over and over again. I don't know. We gotta break that cycle. Democrats, when they get in and they clean up the mess and they do good things, they have to make people understand that those good things happened because of the people who were writing the laws. Anyway, thanks. Earl, I got to move on. I want to try to get in another call.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our friend Steve from the Gold Coast is on the line. Hey, Steve.
Yes, and I don't want people to lose track of an important story, and that is that while all this is going on, the Republicans are on the Hill moving their agenda forward with regard to the budget, which includes that tax cut that was promised to the uber wealthy. So keep in mind that not only are you losing on this side because the economy is being devastated by the Trump policies, but the plan on the part of the GOP is to give the uber wealthy more money.
So of course, they don't have enough, Steve.
Exactly. But if they do this, you talk about terrible timing. That already would face enough of a backlash. But to do it in this environment where, we've gone from 20% to a 60% chance of a recession, according to economists, and then to say, oh, by the way, we're going to give the uber wealthy huge tax breaks. We're going to extend the existing breaks, which are set to expire now. I can't think of a better formula. It would be devastating, certainly to our economy and to the national debt and so forth, because that's what balloons the debt. So if you want to lose in the next 2 years as many seats as possible, by all means, pass this legislation. I think it's ridiculous. And I think a lot of Republicans know how dangerous it is. But let's face it, no one wants to speak up. No one wants to risk getting primary by some
Nobody's
MAGA
going to stick their neck out.
Absolutely. And, so their hope is that, well, you know what, if I lose my seat, somebody in the private sector will offer me something in return for my vote. So, that unfortunately is where we are in America. You can literally sell your vote. You can sell public policy.
You're absolutely right. It's they are looking out for their own self-interest, which is, frankly, what 99% of people who are elected do. Whatever it takes for me to be reelected, whatever stance I have to take, even if it goes against my own moral compass, whatever. The most important thing is for me to be in office. Thank you for the call, Steve. And I just, I thank you, the people who are texting in to say that they really like this show and they like me. And one person, Ed, texted in, I protest against Trump and Musk, and I'm not being paid to do so. Stephanie Miller, a long time ago, had George Soros on as a guest, and she was like, George, I hear you're paying all these people to be resistors. She goes, where's my check? And he goes, no, you're not getting it. No, there's no checks. So, Myrna, anybody who has a different point of view, and a different take on things, I will always listen to. But I will not let people use up these airwaves to say things that are not true. Nobody is being paid to protest. Believe me, if you could be paid to protest, I'd be a lot richer. We're going to take a break for news. We'll be back with more after this.
Remember when you get to work to hop over to WCPT820.com or the TuneIn Radio app and stream The Stephanie Miller Show. Weekdays 8 to 11 a.m. on Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you from, your TV days all the way up to today. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
I am welcoming to our program somebody who writes for Mother Jones and somebody who is keeping an eye on what is going on with the cuts that are going to affect women's health care, pregnancy. That is Julianne McShane, and she joins us now. Julianne, thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Just this month, you wrote, it's hard to keep track, Julianne, of all the people being let go from all the different departments and what they did and what we will now be, at least for the time being, doing without. I sometimes fall behind. So I know you've been looking at some of the firings from Health and Human Services, particularly as it applies to reproductive health. Tell us what you found.
Yes. So last Tuesday, your listeners probably heard that RFK's Health and Human Services enacted mass firings of 10,000 people across that agency. And I did a story on one office that was nearly decimated. It was the Division of Reproductive Health at the CDC, which is an office that people might not have heard of before, but that actually has a lot of impact and does a lot of really important work around reproductive health issues, including some that President Trump has claimed to prioritize in his second term. So basically, two of the three branches at this office were eliminated. And that includes a team that was working on IVF, which, of course, is one of the issues that the president has said he would prioritize in this next term. He has pledged to expand IVF access. And this 6-person team at this division was working on exactly that. They were actually doing work that Congress mandated 20 years ago. Congress required that they monitor IVF clinics across the country and track their pregnancy success rates. They also had a tool that people could use on the CDC website to estimate their chance of having a successful pregnancy through IVF. And one of the researchers on that team actually told me that they were in the middle of researching how to make treatments cheaper through state-mandated insurance. So that seems to be exactly what Trump claims to care about and claims to be interested in working on, yet this entire team was eliminated. And there were several other teams in that agency as well that worked on things like access to contraception, planning to take care of pregnant people in emergencies, monitoring maternal and infant health, that were also entirely eliminated.
But Julianne, he's the father of in vitro fertilization. When is IVF going to be free? Because he promised that. He promised it was going to be free. So how are these cuts going to impact the free in vitro fertilization program that I'm sure is coming any day now?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think that people have to keep in mind that that promise was pretty unlikely to come to fruition from the start. I believe that the estimates that I saw from experts after he promised that on the campaign trail were that it would cost around $8 billion, I believe. More recently, he signed an executive order in January that the White House, it may actually have been February. It was early on in his term, but the White House claimed that this order would expand IVF access. It did not do that. It simply said that one of his officials he wanted an official to study and propose different ways that the government could make IVF more accessible. So we're supposed to be seeing that report soon. It should be issued within the next month or so, I believe. I think it had a 90-day timeline on it. But you would imagine that keeping a team at the CDC that is actually dedicated to doing exactly that, to making IVF more accessible, might be one of those recommendations. But I think one of the other things that has just become more and more clear with time is that it's unclear whether people like Trump or RFK really even know the extent of these firings and the particular teams that are being impacted. And I don't say that to let them off the hook, but more just to underscore that they're really taking DOJ and the officials, the bureaucrats who are following through with these marching orders. They're really taking a slash and burn approach. They're just firing teams of people indiscriminately, canceling research grants. RFK was on an interview with CBS yesterday and claimed not to know about certain grants that were canceled.
Wait a minute. And I'm assuming they let him get away with that answer. He's head of the agency. These cuts are important enough that he's getting asked about it by the media, and he doesn't know. Nobody briefed him. He didn't. There wasn't a little pamphlet on his desk when he first moved into his office.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's hard to know what to believe. I mean, one thing I would say is that HHS is a huge agency. It had over 80,000 people before the firings of the reduction of 20,000 people, which includes half of whom were fired, the other half of whom were pushed into voluntary buyouts and early retirement. One thing I will say is I've been speaking to a lot of different HHS workers at different offices, which include the CDC, the FDA, NIH. And one thing that these people have all said is they say, RFK is really not relevant to our day-to-day. He's, a lot of them think he's an idiot. They acknowledge that he's the figurehead of HHS out there in the media. But the people who actually matter more to their day-to-day work are the particular people that are running the CDC, the FDA, the NIH. It's the people running those particular offices. So I don't know. I'm sure that RFK had to have some knowledge of some of these grant cancellations and firings that, surely the press office at HHS knew would be problematic. But I also, I also think it's possible that these high-level officials, there probably are cases in which they did not realize how this slash and burn approach would actually manifest. And it's obviously manifesting in these ways that go against their stated goals, whether it's to prioritize IVF or, reduce waste in the government, and they're firing people who do these critical jobs. So it's hard to know exactly what to believe. But at the very least, they're claiming that, they made some mistakes. Some people are going to be reinstated. And so it remains to be seen if that will happen.
How are they deciding that? I mean, okay, when you dismiss all the people who know how the nuclear programs work, I could see where, oopsie, let's get them back because we can't figure out these codes. But when it's something like Health and Human Services, which is a little bit more nebulous, how are they making the decisions on, I'm sorry, your firing was an oopsie, but your firing, oh, no, we stand by that. What are the criteria?
We don't know. We really don't know.
Do they know?
No, I think that from what I can tell, I think that the only thing that has really led people to getting their jobs back is if they're working on, if they are working on critical work that is a priority for the highest levels of the agency, or court orders. So, there are a bunch of thousands of probationary workers who are mostly early career government workers who were fired back a couple of months ago. They were told that they would be reinstated last month because a court ruled that they had to be. But this week, SCOTUS and another appeals court actually ruled that the Trump administration can proceed with firing them. So you have people who have been dealing with this whiplash, the back and forth of, being told that they've lost their jobs, being told that they'll get them back, and then now worrying that they could lose their jobs again. When it comes to HHS specifically, RFK did say last week that some firings were mistakes and that people would be reinstated. And like a day after that, there was a report that came out in Politico that reported that there were actually no plans for that to happen. So I think, again, it's hard to know what's actually going to happen, but I think the one thing that is certain is all of this just underscores the sheer chaos that has been unleashed as a result of this slash and burn approach, these mass firings. And, we also know for sure, just by virtue of looking at this example of, this one small IVF team, that many of these firings seem to contradict what they claim their priorities actually are.
We need to take a break. Mother Jones this April published Julianne McShane's article on mass firings from reproductive health workers in Health and Human Services. There's a program called PRAM, and one of the people she spoke to claimed that they'd also voted for Trump, but now they think that maybe that didn't work out quite the way they wanted to. We'll talk about that and more when we come right back after this.
Podcasts of Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and Amazon. Just search for Joan Esposito.
You're listening to WCPT 820, because facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
To Julianne McShane about her reporting in Mother Jones on the effect it's had on pregnancy care, reproductive health, maternal care with these some of these mass firings from Health and Human Services. One of the programs that she writes about is something called PRAMS, and she spoke to some of the people working on this. First of all, talk about PRAMS, if you would, Julianne.
Sure. So this is a massive annual survey that is used by most states in the country, all but 3, and it collects data about people's health and access to doctors before, during, and after their pregnancy. So this has historically been a really important tool for researchers who are studying maternal and infant health, for officials trying to propose ways to bolster maternal and infant health, because this survey collects data about more than 80% of births across the country, and it's collecting data, again, during the periods before, during, and after pregnancy. So it really offers a wealth of information about social determinants of health and people's experiences of pregnancies and, how people's time being pregnant can impact the health of their infants and that kind of thing. So the team that was working on this, about 15 people, they were entirely eliminated last week when the mass firings at HHS occurred. And this is something that really concerned a lot of researchers and advocates who know how important this data is, just to getting a sense of maternal and infant health across the country.
And tell me about your interview with Michael.
Yeah, Isaac Michael. Michael is his last name. But this is one of the members of that team who I spoke to, the only person who was willing to speak on the record. And this is someone who was really interesting. He was a Trump voter who is opposed to abortion, yet works on a team that studies maternal and infant health. And, these are linked because we know that abortion is a procedure that often plays a key part in healthcare that can sometimes be life-saving. Abortion bans have impacted maternal mortality across the country, which is already at a record high for all wealthy nations. So I was pretty surprised to hear from this person who is a statistician, or who was a statistician on that team and helped with the data analysis, that, you know, he was steeped in this data around maternal and infant health, and urgently, you know, wanted to be reinstated and was really hopeful that would happen, but also with someone who had voted for Trump. So our conversation was pretty interesting because, you know, he was someone who was basically processing in real time that he had lost his job because of this new administration's priorities. So, yeah, you know, hearing him sort of try to make sense of that was interesting. And I, you know,
so he didn't just say to you, yes, I am, Julian, I am actually waste. And it was a good thing I got fired because I was bloat. And look at that.
No. I mean, this is someone who, you know, thought that, like many people I spoke to, including those who worked on different teams, that the work that team in particular did, this PRAMS data collection, was so important. And so, you know, but his explanation was, he said that he thinks that this fell through the cracks. And which, I mean, you kind of actually have to genuinely wonder, you know, same thing with this IVF team. It's sort of, as I was saying earlier, these teams do such critical work, and they are allegedly so aligned with what the administration claims to care about that, you know, you have to wonder, like, did people at the highest levels of government know that these people are going to lose their jobs? And if so, why wouldn't they stop it? Because you know, why and how do you cut teams working on expanding IVF access and monitoring maternal and infant health? But yeah, Isaac told me, you know, he said, I agree with a lot of the Trump administration, but he really did not agree, obviously, with his team's firing. And he's still hopeful that his team could potentially be reinstated.
Did you happen to ask Isaac if he had bothered to familiarize himself with Project 2025, the mandate for leadership, which goes agency by agency, talking about the people that they are going to get rid of? Did he bother to even look into that?
Yeah, we didn't talk about Project 2025, but it is interesting that, you know, so Project 2025 does address a lot. They don't get into all the granularities of, you know, the work of this particular division at Reproductive Health. So, you know, they don't address, like, the PRAMS team, for example. But one thing that is really interesting is that Project 2025 does recommend that the CDC increase its collection of data around the provision of abortion. Historically, that data has been provided voluntarily by the states to the CDC, and Project 2025 recommends that that data be required to be handed over. What's really interesting is that last week, the team at the Division of Reproductive Health that worked on the abortion surveillance was actually eliminated. So again, these firings are just really haphazard, and in some cases actually contradict, you know, exactly what Project 2025 proposes.
Has he talked to anybody? I mean, I know there was a woman profiled in the Washington Post. She voted for Trump because she thought she was going to get free IVF, and instead, as a Park Service employee, she lost her job. So not only is she apparently not getting free IVF, she doesn't have a job, and now her husband and her are even less able to afford it themselves. Does he have any buyer's remorse, or is he still making excuses? It shouldn't have happened. It was an accident. They didn't mean to do it, et cetera, and so forth?
I did ask about if he felt regret for his vote, and I didn't really get a straight answer. He just feels at this point like the most important thing he can do is advocate for the reinstatement of this team. He's been in touch with several senators trying to raise concerns about this because senators were concerned about the potential elimination of that particular team, even prior to when these firings actually took effect. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned that great story in the Washington Post, focusing on that federal worker who voted for Trump because she wanted free IVF, lost her job, still doesn't have free IVF. So I expect that, we're probably going to hear a lot more from federal workers like them who thought that they were getting one thing when they voted for Trump and then, got something very different.
I would like to suggest, Julianne, that your next article be simply a list of people who voted for Trump and like a quote from each of them. I didn't think he would do it to me. I didn't think it would affect me. I thought it would affect those other people. I said the first time I heard one of these stories that I couldn't take it. That I couldn't take 4 years of hearing. Well, I didn't think he'd do that. That hurts me. Oh, wait a minute. What do you mean? This thing that I want to buy is now more expensive, or I've lost my job, or I'm government waste. I don't understand how so many people believed a man who in his first term was found by the Washington Post to have told more than 30,000 lies to the American people. But suddenly this time he says IVF is going to be free and you believe him? I don't know. I'm beginning to worry about our country. And I'm not talking about Trump. I'm talking about the people who vote and how seemingly little effort they put in to really knowing who they're voting for. Sorry, that's a little off topic, Julianne, but I can't help myself.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's, I think it's a great point. I don't really know what to say. I think that people vote, in many cases without realizing how the policies of someone like Trump will actually affect them. But we are obviously more and more people and the country at large is really seeing that the effects are just so wide-reaching.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I keep saying is people have to realize we are the waste. When they say they're cutting waste, we are the waste. Because they're certainly not going to do anything that affects the billionaire bros. Not that they need the help anyway. It's people like us that do. Julianne, thank you for this reporting. And please keep talking to these people because I want to see how this plays out.
Thanks so much for having me. And yes, I plan to keep doing so.
And as I've said before, folks, Mother Jones, you're looking for sources of information that you can rely on if you feel the mainstream media in many cases is letting you down. Mother Jones, that's one of the places that you can find good reporting, good, solid reporting from people like Julianne McShane. If you want to look up this article, by the way, it was posted April 4th on the Mother Jones website. So it's really worth a read. We are going to take a break. There has been lots of aviation news today. We're going to talk about that and much more with Joe Brancatelli when we come back.
Take Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive with you on the go by using the TuneIn app on your phone. Just search for WCPT 820.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Joe Brancatelli is the man behind the business travel newsletter Joe Sent Me. And it's fun. I am not a business traveler, but I enjoy reading it anyway. It always has lots of good information. Joe, I'm sure you've heard today we've had a couple of incidents. 2 American Airlines jets bumped wings at Reagan Airport, and now a helicopter has crashed into the Hudson. But you know what? I'm so glad we got rid of some of those air traffic controllers because you're looking at waste there, buddy. How are you?
Well, I was. I can't remember when I was fine anymore, given the last couple of weeks. It's worth mentioning that down at National Airport in Washington, which of course is technically called Reagan National Airport, it shouldn't shock you that the airport now with the most troublesome airspace is the one named after the guy who fired all the air traffic controllers 40 years ago, forgive me, and we've never recovered from that. I mean, I tell that to people and they're stunned. We have fewer air traffic before Musk got what he wanted, whatever it is Musk is doing. Before Musk got there, we had fewer air traffic controllers then in the last 6 months than we had in 1981. So none of this should come as a shock. We've been awfully lucky in the skies, and it's going to be more difficult, not even so much because they're firing air traffic controllers, although they deny it. It's that our luck may be running out after all these years. This is the way it works. Actors and actresses die in threes. Unfortunately, aviation incidents happen in bunches, and people get very nervous.
Well, Joe, some people are saying, well, is it really that we're having more incidents, or is it just now that we're sensitive to this story where it's being reported more?
Yes. I mean, both can be true. Everyone's got a cell phone now with a camera, so everyone's a quote-unquote citizen journalist. So we now, when wings clip on a runway, we know about that. But all kinds of other incidents we know about now that we would have never known about before. But there's also no question that there are troubling signs based on everything from aircraft age to the number of flights we've been pushing through the skies. However, the tariffs may take care of that. I mean, I guess if you're looking for the bright side of the tariff war, it scared travelers so much they'll stay home that airlines will reduce flights, and then it'll be less crowded in the skies, and there could be less incidents. How's that for trying to put a happy
Yeah, really. Picture? Not very good, Joe. You got to work on that.
Sorry.
You said in one of your newsletters recently that we might see a reduction in the number of flights to Europe, not because people from the United States don't want to travel from Europe, but if there really is a European boycott, airlines can't afford to have these planes fly back empty or half empty. How does that look to you now?
Well, I think it's very concerning. And again, the average American traveler, whether he or she is a business traveler or a leisure traveler, doesn't think in terms of two-way. They think in, is there a flight for me out of O'Hare or Midway going to point Y? They don't think about, does anybody get on the plane starting in point Y trying to come to Chicago? Well, you need both sides of the equation to make airline economics work. Mm-hmm. And if the Europeans stay home, as the Canadians have begun to stay home, and actively snub the United States, there will be a lot of flights that simply disappear. Now, as I said in one of the newsletters you just mentioned, we looked at March's numbers came in this week, and there were 180,000 fewer Europeans coming to the United States this March than there was last year. However, Easter has gotten kicked over into April, so that could affect the numbers. Europeans do a lot of traveling around Easter, so we don't really know. But you can't ignore the fact, Joan, that the United States is not a very welcoming place to visitors right now. I mean, forget about the Canadians who look over at us and say, when are you going to have a real adult running the country? Should we get you a guardian until you can grow up? The Europeans look at this. The British have changed their travel advisories. The Germans have changed their travel advisories.
What do you mean? They're saying, like, it's dangerous, be careful?
Well, they don't know, and danger is the unknown. They're saying things like, look, we don't understand what the U.S. Customs people are doing. They may or may not be basing their decisions to let you into the country based on what they see you've posted on social media or something like that. It's very confusing if you're a European or an Asian or a Latin American looking to come to the United States right now. You don't know if you're welcome. You don't know if you'll be turned away at the border, or if you're let in, suddenly some guys will leap out of a car and stick you in the back of the car and saying, "We're ICE, you are let in by mistake, so out you go." This is really troublesome for the Europeans because their reaction is, well, there are other places we can go, you know.
Yeah. Really. I know that the Europeans have been talking about, importing less, buying less American products, doing less travel. But I heard a while back that French President Macron wanted to organize an official EU boycott of the United States. I don't know where that stands as of this moment, but that would seem to me to be an escalation that will hit the airlines really hard.
Look, the airline. Now, I have to say, the airlines have absolutely no backbone. We can take Chicago-based airline United. They were derided by the MAGA crowd as being woke, because they certain policies that, whatever the right wing decides is woke. Well, now you've got the guy running, Scott Kirby, running United, saying, well, we think tariffs are a good idea. So the airlines will bend with the wind, as Captain Renault did in Casablanca, and at the moment the prevailing wind seems to be coming from the right wing. But in the long term, nothing Trump is doing, including delaying the tariffs by 90 days, is good for travel. We will have what I think is a really important period coming up. This weekend is the Passover. Next weekend, most Christians' sects will celebrate Easter. That's when a lot of families sit down at the table and say, what can we do for a family? Are we going to go on a camping trip? Are we going to, finally do that trip to see our roots in Germany or Italy or Spain, or even Mexico or Peru? Well, with this economy right now, price of eggs are higher than ever, if we're going to go with that one. And now the market's jumping up and down like a jumping bean. It's not something that makes it conducive for you to want to say, let's spend some money on a high ticket or even a low ticket travel. Just today, Frontier Airlines, and you can't get cheaper than Frontier, I said, yeah, we're not seeing what we thought we'd be seeing in the second quarter. So obviously their traffic is dropping. The high-end travel, business class, will hold up a little better for a little longer, but it cannot sustain this kind of endless chaos. I mean, today is very worrisome if you're watching the market, because they gave back a third of yesterday's gains and there was no quote-unquote bad news. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty sure that if the market continues to drop, people look at their retirement funds, their 401ks, and say, well, I just don't think it's wise move right now to travel. So there'll be a lot of staycations again.
This morning in the Wall Street Journal, despite President Trump's partial tariff reprieve Wednesday, trade uncertainty will continue to ripple through the economy and do collateral damage. The latest canary is Delta Airlines, which said Wednesday it's halting expansion plans as consumers and businesses retrench. CEO Ed Bastian said with broad economic uncertainty around global trade, growth has largely stalled. We're acting as if we're going into a recession. And earlier, this was a guy who had said he thought 2025 was going to be Delta's best year. He's not saying that now.
Yeah, he also cozied up to Trump. So, thoughts and prayers for your bottom line. But this is problematic. The leisure travel part of this is pretty obvious, Joan. We all look at our pocketbooks and say, well, that trip we were going to take, we won't take. But business travel is much more, I don't want to say insidious, but consider the fact that a lot of travel into Chicago is going to shows and conventions at McCormick Place. You don't have to stop traveling to a trade show or a convention at McCormick Place to cut your travel. Maybe last year you sent 5 people. This year you say to your travel manager, look, just send 4. That's a 20% reduction in business travel right there. without stopping business travel, you've knocked 20% off your travel expenditures. That adds up. And the airlines, for as nasty as they are not particularly profitable operations. Even in good times, airlines don't get up to what they call investment grade of 15% return on investment. So any kind of rupture really does impact them, and they will do all sorts of things, cutting routes, substituting smaller planes for larger planes, obviously putting on sales. But sales are self-defeating because not only do you not bring in the revenue you'd hope to bring in, you condition people to look at that price. You know, if somebody comes out with a $99 fare to California as to fill up the planes, when you try to raise it back to, say, $149, people notice and say, how dare you raise my price? So, so nothing that's happening here with tariffs is good. But then we knew that. Okay, and this is sadly what America voted for, and now they're going to have to eat it. And it might not be eggs because they won't be able to afford eggs.
Good grief. Joe, you mentioned something that I want to go back to, that business travel, or rather business class, or I assume first class travel, that those seats are more profitable for the airlines, right?
When they sell them, yes. But if they go empty,
because I was going to say, why don't they just turn more of their plane into the higher priced seats?
Well, you can't just say, okay, we had 20, let's say on a flight between Chicago and London, we had, say, 50 business class seats. Let's make it 60. The seats are not the same. You'd have to take the plane out of service, you know, change the seats. But so the only way the airlines have, it's a blunt instrument. If people start traveling, the only way you can get them back into those seats up front is by lowering the cost or making it cheaper to claim a frequent travel award. I've been watching, needless to say, I've been watching the award levels right now saying, well, it's Easter coming up. My wife's physical therapy is done on Wednesday. You know, in the perfect world, we would take a quick trip to Europe. We're based in New York, so it's easier. But even at that, the awards, you know, the awards have come down a little bit, but not a lot, because no one knows what to do, Joan. That's the problem. It's not, you know, as bad as it was when Trump said there's going to be no negotiations on these tariffs. Stopping the tariffs for 90 days only adds uncertainty, and uncertainty is death for travel.
Yeah.
People who are not.
If he had have come out and said, you know, whatever excuse of the day, whatever, I'm winning, the tariffs for everybody but China are gone, and they're gone forever. Would that have made people feel more confident? But this guy is so capricious. Who knows if he even if he said, you know, because now I'm seeing reporting this morning, oh, Trump is leaving open the door to extending the tariff pause. But how is that supposed to make a business which has to plan ahead? How is that supposed to give them confidence?
Joan, you're right. We know the answer to this. Okay, I've tried to keep the political side of this as limited as possible in my newsletters because the facts, I believe, speak for themselves. But there is no plan here. Listen, I'm born and raised in New York. I grew up a half a mile from Trump's father's towers, not the Trump Towers in Manhattan, but the original Trump Towers, what we used to call them. Okay? Trump's father was a smart guy, not a nice guy, but a smart guy. Trump is not a nice guy, and he's stupid. He has no plan. He has no reality. And when your own guy like Elon Musk, who plowed $300 million into his campaign, calls your trade guy, Peter Navarro, a moron, it's hard to argue with Elon Musk, at least there. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's listening to a guy who made up his sources. Okay, we're journalists. We know what that's.
Was that Ron Barron or something?
Ron Barron, which, by the way, is just an anagram of Navarro.
Yes. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, Peter Navarro quoted in a lot of his writing, quoted this expert as as verification and backup that the ideas Peter Navarro was putting out. Well, look at this researcher. He found the same thing, only that person doesn't exist, and his name is an anagram of Peter Navarro's last name. This is the guy who is advising Trump on tariffs.
It is totally chaotic. And, of course, it's aided by the fact that no matter what happens, Trump will claim he planned it, and it's a win, even when it's a loss. So, as you're looking as the detritus is all over the place, the airlines look at this and say, well, I'm not going to buy new – they may defer new deliveries. What they'll probably do, there's a lot of – 30 seconds of background. Remember the pandemic? It seems so far away. There has been this burst of travel since the end of the pandemic. A lot of people have called it revenge travel. Well, I think that's coming to an end now. These are the kind of things that slap you down. I'd use a word that we use on the streets. I won't use it here. You'll get slapped, and people will say, okay, I guess we've had all the fun travel we want. It doesn't take much to cancel a leisure travel. It's totally voluntary. And most of business travel is voluntary. And when you're in this kind of crazy economic period where the markets are gyrating, and it's not like 20 years ago when you could say, I'm not in the market, it doesn't matter. The vast bulk of people now have 401ks and retirement accounts. Everybody's involved with the market. It's not just Main Street, it's Wall Street too. So when you have these kind of gyrations, they can claim inflation has stopped, but I just saw the numbers that said if we're going to do the egg thing, eggs cost more now than they did when the black lady was running for president. So we can't claim inflation has stopped. There's no incentive to travel, and the airlines will have to react. So will hotels. And you'll see airlines pulling planes out of service, retiring many of them, killing routes.
I hadn't even thought about hotels, Joe. Yeah. But, I mean, it's obvious now that you mention it, of course. If people aren't flying over, they're not staying in the hotels either, are they?
Well, yeah, and as I mentioned in one of my newsletters, Joan, and this is something, the average listener won't know, but about 30 to 40 years ago, hoteliers started building hotels that had a shelf life of 20, 25 years. You look at Chicago, you say, but the Drake has been there for 100 years, and, even the Ritz-Carlton and the Water Tower has been there for 40 years. Well, that's not the kind of hotels. Go out to the suburbs, go out to Niles or Oak Brook or any place, and you see these endless stream of hotels, in the middle of the market or the lower end of the market. That many of these were designed to last 20 years. But the economy had gotten so good and so strong that hoteliers found ways to keep them open, often by going to a cheaper flag and charging maybe a little less because it was a sunken asset already. They'd already paid for everything. Now it won't be profitable for those hotels to stay open if travel dries up, so those hotels will close, and those people will be put out of work. They're simply, as I said, except for the silver lining of maybe there will be fewer plane incidents because there'll be fewer planes in the sky, you can't find good news here with what the tariffs and the Trump policy is bringing us. Travel is the sharp end of all economic things. It's the first thing to be hurt in a downtime. It's also the last thing to come back when times get good, because it just looks like the kind of expenditure you can defer. Mm-hmm. So this is just death for travel. And, as I say, we'll know more in a couple of weeks after Passover and Easter whether anybody will keep buying summer and fall and even next holiday season. I mean, don't forget, people will sit down at their holiday tables and maybe plan with their families. Do we want to go to Europe, for Christmas or New Year? Mm-hmm. Well, if they pass on it now, they won't come back because, honestly, they won't have a chance to talk. Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of life we live now. You can say all you want about we can do it all on a text string, but you tend not to plan travel that way as a family. So this is also coming at a terrible time for discretionary leisure travel.
Joe, I have a question.
Yeah.
Apparently, Palm Springs, California, is a very popular destination, travel destination for Canadians. The Tourism Bureau there said that they get an estimated 300,000 Canadians. And as you know, Canadians are a little ticked off at us right now. So the Palm Springs Chamber of Commerce, you know how they all throughout Chicago, or probably, I don't know about New York, we have banners, promoting a theater company or promoting a neighborhood festival. We have all these big banners that hang off of lights. And Palm Springs is putting up banners right now that say, "We love Canadians." It doesn't seem like the kind of thing that would maybe turn this around. Is an effort like that even worth it?
It helps. Listen, the best news I can say about this is that the average Canadian understands the average American. Even the average Trump voter does not want to go to war with Canada, okay? Either economically, socially, politically, or, heaven forfend, militarily. But the Canadians are the most frequent visitors to the United States. It's not something you might think about, or you might believe it without even knowing it. More Canadians come to the United States than any other international travelers. For example, England, which is the largest European visitors, 5 times more Canadians come than Brits. We need Canadians to come, especially in the Sun Belt and places like Palm Springs, in the winter. I'm hearing from hoteliers saying the Canadians checked out this year, and their traditional policy is booking the same room for next year. They left this year without planning to come back. So they didn't book a room. So, again, but...
So that's why you say this is really going to have a long-lasting effect. Even if Trump did something to try to fix this all tomorrow, certain things just aren't going to be fixed right away.
This is a problem that will resonate for years. Let's say Trump has an overnight conversion, and tomorrow says, "Boy, I think Canada is the greatest country ever, and they've been our best friends forever. And of course, I was just kidding about being the 51st state. Please forgive me for bad jokes." Do you think the Canadians are going to believe him? They will if it goes away or when he goes away. But talk among the many self-inflicted wounds we've seen in the last couple of weeks, this attack on Canadians is the most unforgivable and the most dangerous, because we now have what's called a travel deficit of over $50 billion, which means we spend $50 million more overseas and internationally than people do spend here. If people stop coming here, it's only going to get worse. So as I say, there is just nothing you can see in the travel horizon right now that is good news because of what's happened. I mean,
and one thing you said, I think we really need to stress, you said that this will cause, because if they're going to cut back on flights, this will cause airlines to retire older aircraft. A lot of those older aircraft are bigger aircraft. I don't want to fly in those little bitty planes. You're all smushed up in the little bitty planes.
Well, there's 2 levels of this show. The littlest, bittiest planes, those RJs, in fact, those planes that clipped wings today at National, may disappear because they're very old. They're first generations of what we call in the travel industry RJs, regional jets. And a lot of them come into Chicago to connect onto a bigger plane, okay? So those may get retired, and that means there'll be fewer routes to smaller towns, okay? But then on the flip side of this, the last generation of Boeing 747s are still flying. Those will be retired because it's their time. In many cases, they've stayed in the air because of this boom after the pandemic. And the Airbus A380, which is essentially the newest big jet, had already been written off because it was just too big. when you could take a plane and put 500 people on it, when the pandemic came, these planes were hopelessly, useless. Well, they all got pulled out of the desert and put back in the air because there was so much traffic. Those planes will be retired again. And in their place, you will get either a smaller wide body or, honestly, a narrow body jet across oceans, which is a very unpleasant experience if you haven't had it yet. An airline like Aer Lingus has at least planned to launch flights between Dublin and Nashville. It's not exactly a prime route, right?
Really?
But they could do it. But they could do it because there are these very small planes, essentially a domestic aircraft that they've re-equipped to fly really long distances, 3x3 across one aisle. You're going to see a lot more of those on prime routes. We're used to wide-body planes, Chicago, London. Well, that might go away.
Ugh.
Because these planes, the newest generation of planes, are so efficient, but the cost of efficiency is they're very narrow and very small. So these so-called long, thin routes, as the airline industry calls it, will come
What's
visit
a long,
Chicago.
thin route? That means it's a long route with a thin plane?
It's a route like Nashville, Dublin.
Oh.
Not a lot of traffic. You could never support it with a big, fat, wide-body plane with two aisles. But you could possibly support it with one of these, what they call it, I don't want to get so technical, it's called the Airbus A321LXR. It's a plane you might take between Chicago and Los Angeles, re-equipped for super long and transoceanic traffic. So it carries like 160 people instead of 300. And there'll be one aisle, and it'll be 3x3 in coach, and you'll have even less legroom than you have now, and even the premium class will be not quite as good. So you'll see more of these as these planes come off the line and the airlines retire the bigger planes. People like frequency. You can't, if every place flew once a day, if you flew between Chicago and London once a day, you could fill up a 2,000-seat plane. We don't have a 2,000-seat plane, but you could. So the airlines say, okay, give me 500-seat planes or 8 200-seat planes. There's many ways to cut up that traffic, and the smaller the planes you have, the more flights you can offer on a very busy route, like, say, Chicago-London. But on a route like, say, Chicago-Milan or Chicago-Frankfurt, you might not need the wide-body planes. You can substitute smaller planes to go there, and that will be less comfortable, assuming you can even justify the route if the tariff thing doesn't go crazy. So these are all unintended. These are the unknown unknowns, as the late, great Don Rumsfeld once said.
Yeah.
Or what no one had on their bingo card. And certainly no one in the Trump administration has thought about this, certainly nobody at the Commerce Department or the Transportation Department, because these guys have all been told whatever Trump says is the law, and you just keep your head down and do it.
Joe, thank you for joining us. And I want to this has been a lot of really great information, and if you weren't taking notes, this conversation is going to be available. Look for Joan Esposito featured interviews wherever you get your podcasts. Joe Brancatelli, you can find his insights at the Business Travel newsletter. Joe sent me out of Business Traveler, but I love reading it anyway. Joe, thank you.
Thanks for having me. Have a wonderful holiday, everybody.
You too. We're going to take a break for news, and we're going to be back with more after this.
The Thom Hartmann radio program provides all of the intelligence, information, and insight you'll need to win the water cooler wars. Weekdays 11 to 2 right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Quite frankly, I get most of my news from you.
Joan Esposito.
Y'all ready for this?
On WCPT 820.
We haven't talked to political strategist Peter Giangreco for a while because if you follow him on social media, he has become quite the traveler. He's here, he's there, he's everywhere. And I'm thinking, could you sit down? Could you go home for 5 minutes so we can get something on the schedule? And finally, I found a window of opportunity. And Peter Giangreco joins us now. How are you, Peter? You should be very well rested.
I'm doing great, Joan. The world's a mess, but we're doing fine.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. The rest of your life may be miserable, but on social media, you look like you are having a lot of fun. And I am so jealous. Every time I see you somewhere, you're here at a wedding, you're there at a family event, then you're just traveling. I want to be Peter Giangreco when I grow up.
You should shoot higher than that, Joan. My favorite thing I did this week was sell my Tesla.
About damn time, Peter.
Yeah, I just, when our felonious president started selling them on the White House lawn was enough for me. So I took it to CarMax and I sold it and got a nice picture of me giving Elon the finger, which you can find on my Facebook page. So,
well, I actually posted my picture of me saying goodbye to my Tesla on Instagram. I decided in December that I needed to get a different car, and I was doing all this research, which it has a mileage, blah, 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 blah. And it was March 1st. By the time I actually got around to selling my used car for another used car. But in that time, December, January, February, the trade-in value dropped $6,000. And I thought, well, that's my punishment for dilly-dallying. And then in another month, I read people were texting in about how they were trading in their Teslas and they were sitting at car dealerships. And one person said, in the 2 hours I was sitting at the dealership, 9 people came in and wanted to know what trade-in value they could get for their Teslas. So, man, maybe I was lucky that I did it as soon as I did it.
Yeah, they took 2 in and trade the day I was there at the CarMax out in Hillside. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's you struck a chord here, and I have to say that I just sent a picture of me flipping Elon and the president off, and it got more likes than anything I've ever posted on social media. So it kind of speaks to.
Well, maybe I should have done that. My post was kind of like a wake because I was talking about, she was a good car, but she was made by a bad man, and so I had to get rid of her. Mine was a very sad post. Yes.
Yeah, I loved it. I had it for 8 years. I would have driven it for another couple of years, but because it was so old that the supercharging was free, so I felt like I was,
Oh man, you were one of the lucky ones. I never got that.
Yeah, so I was sticking it to Elon $10, $20, $30 at a time because all my supercharging was free, so that was great. But all good things have to come to an end.
Well, Steve Sanders from Channel 9. He had originally bought a Tesla S, and then he traded it in for the smaller one, the Y. And he told me he's gotten rid of it since then. But he told me he went through the car wash with all the windows rolled up, and he said water poured into the car. He said that apparently the Y wasn't quite as well made as the S.
There you go. You go. So that the interesting thing is really how incredibly unpopular Elon Musk is for good reason. But we had something that I'd never seen before. My partners worked on the Crawford race in Wisconsin, and that was a big win for the state Supreme Court there. They actually pulled Elon's numbers because he dropped $25 million into that race and lost by 10 points, which in Wisconsin is a landslide.
Oh, God.
And I had never seen numbers like this among Democrats. Elon Musk's favorable, unfavorable rating was 0 favorable 95 unfavorable. I've never seen any.
Was that in the Wisconsin polling that the strategy group did?
That was in the, but not we don't do polling, but we consume it. But yeah, that's. I mean, you talk about a supervillain. He's it, but people forget. For all the bad things that Elon Musk is doing, it's Donald Trump who's destroying the economy right now.
Absolutely.
And destroying people's 401ks. And, some folks, if you're in your 40s or 50s or even your early 60s, you can wait 4 or 5 years for the market to recover. If you're a retiree now and you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s, you don't have any choice. You're required by law to take out regular disbursements from your 401k. You can't wait for the market to come back. You got to take the loss. You're forced to do so. You have no choice. So that's what Donald Trump has done to folks who are on a fixed income and they're relying on their 401k to sustain them for the next 5, 10, 20 years, and they have to take these mandated disbursements, and that means selling stocks in the worst stock market of our lifetime.
The other people who are stuck are the people who did those college accounts, 529s or something like that, because your kid's going to college. You can't afford to say, well, let's wait 5 years. I'm sure it'll bounce back.
Exactly. So it's a mess. And the tariffs themselves, we talked about cars. Obviously, cars are going to cost a lot more. Some American cars, American brands, GM, Ford, Chrysler, they cross the Canadian and Mexican border 1, 2, 3 times sometimes. So you're talking about, tariffs there. Now, Trump realized that he made a huge mistake and put the pause in, but the market still hasn't recovered. We had that sort of dead cat bounce yesterday, and that's all gone again. It's back down because of the 125% tariff now on China. So, I know his daddy bought his way into Wharton, but I don't think Donald Trump ever went to class, because this is economics 101. I mean, you've all seen the clip of Ben Stein from Ferris Bueller. I think Ben Stein's getting...
Anyone?
Yeah, anyone?
Anyone?
Anyone? He's getting more, if he's got residuals on, if he had residuals on YouTube, he'd be a rich man.
Yeah.
So it's a mess, but we got to remember it's Trump that's causing the problem for all the rage at
He's
Musk.
definitely the man behind Elon. But I want to. There's several things I want to talk to you about. Since you started with Elon, I want to talk to you about his big loss in Wisconsin, sinking all that money into the Supreme Court race, and then basically, garnering nothing, absolutely nothing but scorn for it. Does that hurt Elon with currently elected Republican congresspeople and senators? Because before I thought, it was going to be a 1-2 punch. They can't stand up to Trump because he'll get mad, and then he'll use Elon and his money to primary them. Does this make them maybe think twice?
Well, I think it speaks to a larger problem in the Republican Party, which was the reason Elon Musk got involved in Wisconsin. Yes, Tesla has pending litigation where you're not allowed to buy a Tesla in Wisconsin from a dealer. They've got some laws on the books that protect regular auto dealers. And that that case probably would have gone in front of either one of the candidates for state Supreme Court. So there's this massive conflict of interest. But that's not why he sunk $25 million in. That Wisconsin race was a dry run for a party that's got to try to turn out their people when Donald Trump is not on the ballot. And it was an epic fail. Of the $25 million, they spent $2 or $3 million on the ground, paid canvassers, doing everything they could to bring out the Republican vote. And guess what? They got pretty close to their turnout number of what they needed to win. It's just that the Democratic turnout just blew it away. And I think that's the dynamic that you're going to see going forward. is they have a problem motivating extraordinary turnout from their base. They can get folks out, especially if they're spending money on it, but they can't match really. And it's not just Democratic turnout. You got a lot of independents or people who are not that political who wanted to go and register their displeasure at everything that's happening in the country right now.
Interesting. Peter Giangreco and I are going to talk more politics when we come right back after this.
If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Amazon, or HeartlandSignal.com. Just search for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive. You know that you can listen to Chicago's Progressive Talk on WCPT AM 820. Stream us live at WCPT820.com and on the TuneIn Radio app. Or you can ask Alexa, Siri, or Google to play WCPT from TuneIn. But now you have another option. We're simulcasting our programming overnights. 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. on WSBC AM 1240 for a clearer reception in and around the city. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820. And now overnights on WSBC 1240 AM, where facts matter.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
If you want to buy a new home or refinance the one you've got, you need to do what I did and call Team Hochberg, our trusted local lender. Suzanne called David after hearing him explain about discount points on the radio because her son was buying a home in Colorado. David answered Suzanne's questions and encouraged her son to call him for a free consultation. Suzanne was so impressed with the service David provided, she wrote this 5-star Google review. I sent David an email today with a question about discount points. He called me back this evening with a complete explanation. I'm so impressed with his responsiveness and knowledge. David strongly encourages everybody to check out Team Hochberg's more than 500 5-star Google reviews. Team Hochberg has helped me, Suzanne, and thousands of WCPT listeners, but you have to make that call. 855-56-DAVID or 56david.com on your computer. That's 855-563-2843 or 56david.com. Lower.com, equal housing lender, NMLS 1124061.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Peter Giangreco is an strategist and advisor to the stars. And one of the most famous people, one of the more famous people he's worked with is Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan, who Peter is kind of getting beaten up by a lot of Democrats today. She went to the White House to talk to Trump. A lot of what he was doing was hitting her state particularly hard. And from what I read, what they agreed to was a private, behind closed doors meeting. But instead, she was invited to go to the West Wing. She was huddled in the background while he signed some executive orders. You know, Trump likes to really make people suffer, especially if they haven't been big supporters and then they need something from him. Is that what was going on with Gretchen Whitmer? I've seen the pictures. She's huddling by the doorway as he signs a couple of executive orders. I believe he's going after Chris Krebs and Miles Taylor for treason because they said bad things about him when he was in office the first time around. What do you see when you see that whole situation playing out?
Look, I mean, what's at the core of this really are a couple of things. One, we talked about the tariffs in the auto industry in Michigan, which is this is an existential threat to tens of thousands of UAW workers in Michigan who build our cars and do other things. And that, in these states like Michigan that border Canada that do so much, the tariffs are a huge problem. When you combine that with the potential cuts in Medicaid, that's the state and federal program that provides health care for folks. it's pretty grim for these states. So, I think what you're seeing with Governor Whitmer in Michigan is taking off the partisan hat and doing her job as governor and trying to get the best deal they can for Michigan, both for auto workers and to make sure, because, most people who are on Medicaid, who are in a nursing home, Medicaid pays for it. So if there's cuts, your costs go through the roof. So your mother, your father, your aunt, your grandmother.
Or the nursing home calls and says, you've got to come get grandma. Either that or you have to start paying another $5,000, $10,000 a month. But like NBC, on the NBC News on its website wrote about this, a disaster. Gretchen Whitmer's talk on tariffs and meeting with Trump anger fellow Democrats. The Michigan governor tried to play nice with Trump. Instead, there's a sense in the party that she got played when the president used her as a bipartisan Oval Office prop. How does she come back from that?
I think that's a little overwrought analysis, and I think you have to wait and see what happens with Medicaid, because I'm sure that was part of what the conversation was, and I'm sure there was a conversation about tariffs. So I think if you're a UAW worker worried about losing your job, you're glad Gretchen Whitmer's doing everything she can to try to reverse these tariffs and get us back to a place where we're trading with Canada, because it's so central not just to the auto industry in Michigan, it's central to everything. And I think when you start looking at Medicaid, in addition to funding most folks who live in nursing homes, but you have all the Medicaid expansion. These are people who work full time. They've got jobs. Some of them got 2-3 jobs, but they don't have jobs that provide health care, and they can't afford it. The only way they can afford it was the expansion of the Affordable Care Act. That is now all on the chopping block. So if you're worried about losing your health care...
I understand the issues are important, Peter, and I understand why she might have wanted to represent her state. But for instance, in this NBC News article, a Democratic operative who admires Whitmer said it's just an effing disaster. It feels like it removes some of the momentum she had as a politically savvy swing state Dem. How is this going to affect her future? I mean, she's still being bandied about as a potential presidential contestant in 2028.
Mm-hmm. Look, I think there's a story that, Governor Whitmer has always been able to tell, which was they did Medicaid expansion in Michigan, and she got it done as the Senate minority leader with a Republican governor, with a Republican Senate, and a Republican House. And if there was one person who was the one who led the charge and cut a bipartisan deal that got hundreds of thousands of people health care, it was Gretchen Whitmer. It's part of why, people talk about fix the damn roads. That was a big part of the campaign in 2018. But a lot of the story really was revolved around her ability to get Medicaid expansion done in Michigan, which, it was easy to do in Illinois where everybody's a Democrat. It was tough to do when the Republicans controlled both houses of the legislature and had a Republican governor. She got it done anyway. So I would say, long term, this story might be an asset depending on what the outcome is. And so you can have a one-day story.
What do you mean by what the outcome is? Is if she gets benefits, cutouts maybe for the businesses in her state, then it will soften this idea that, that she should never have talked to him. Is that what you're talking about? If it works out economically for Michigan.
Yeah, I mean that's the way Gretchen Whitmer's always worked, which is let's put people first and the politics will take care of itself.
Apparently there was a question and answer after all this, and she said that she empathized with Democrats who don't want Democratic officials to work with Trump, but she said she needs to be collaborative because I took an oath to the people of Michigan to try to get as much done for the state. Is
exactly
that
right?
Is
exactly
that the
right.
answer?
Yeah, and look, look. The easy thing to do is to stay in Lansing and throw stones. That's the easiest thing in the world to do. The harder thing to do is to try to see if you can go and really make the case of why the tariffs, are threatening the auto industry, why the Medicaid expansion is so key, why we don't want grandma and grandpa thrown out of the nursing home. And if that's the result, is that, Trump has backed down. He backed down on the tariffs. We'll see what happens after 90 days. The market isn't really buying it. But the bottom line is if her voice helps move Trump off of these horrible ideas, because the Medicaid cuts are going to drive people's costs up. There are going to be a lot of people who just can't afford their health care in Michigan and can't afford the nursing home care that their parents need or that they need. So to me,
I think it's
not
interesting
that hard.
That after this meeting,
it's not that hard to call.
Yeah, Republicans were also upset. An unnamed Republican strategist was quoted as saying, Trump literally just effed Republicans in Michigan by saying Whitmer is doing an excellent job. I mean, WTF, she's running to replace him in 2028. So there have been complaints on both sides of the aisle about this.
Well, that usually means you're doing the right thing. That was something that President Obama always said. He said, if I do something and I've upset people on the right and the left, I'm almost sure I've done the right thing. And that's what you do when you're governing. Like, running for an office is easy. Governing is hard. And, it's easy to just sit back and throw stones. It's harder to go to someone who you abhor, who you have nothing in common with, and say, what can I do to make sure that auto workers don't get laid off in Michigan, that nursing home patients don't get thrown out of the street, and that people who work for a living actually can afford their health care? Because the costs, it's all about costs here, right? Nursing home care through the roof. If you don't have Medicaid paying for it, a lot of people can't afford it. If you don't have the Medicaid expansion under the Affordable Care Act, you can't afford health care and you go without it. And if the tariffs return and hit the auto industry as badly as we think it's going to, that's people losing their jobs who then lose their benefits, and they this is an existential threat, what's going on here. And you've got a governor that's willing to take the political slings and arrows from both sides to try to do what's right for the people of Michigan. So, you can amplify the voices of the people who are sitting on the sidelines. But there's a poem about the woman in the arena, and she's in the arena.
Peter,
Teddy Roosevelt all over her.
We need to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about what you think will make for effective messaging on the part of Democrats as we head into the midterm elections. Peter Giangreco and I will be right back after this.
There's no excuse to miss Joan Esposito.
It's #1 on my stereo.
Live, local, and progressive. You can listen to her daily at WCPT820.com on your computer or phone.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Democratic strategist Peter Giangreco is here with me. And who better to ask about a good message for the midterms than the man who has worked with all kinds of Democrats in all kinds of races? What would you say to Ken Martin or Chuck Schumer or Hakeem Jeffries? They come to you and they're like, Peter, what should our message be? What should we be talking about to really win back Congress in the midterms?
Well, you got to stay on the economy. I just want to give a little historical context. So the University of Michigan Consumer Confidence Index, right? This is good. This goes back to 50, 60 years of data here. If you look at when the consumer sentiment index drops, the party in power loses in an epic way. So 1974, 1980, 92, 2000, 2008, 2020, 2024, all were predicted by the consumer sentiment. And let me just give you a little context. When Trump lost in 2020, the consumer index, confidence index, was at 81.8. 4 years later, when Biden lost, when Biden is in a position that was unsustainable for Kamala Harris, the University of Michigan Consumer Confidence Index was at 70.4. It's at 57 now, and that was before the stock market plunged. Okay, so you got to stay on the economy, what does that mean? Healthcare costs. Talk about healthcare, and that includes abortion, by the way, when you're talking about healthcare, because abortion is healthcare. Talk about Social Security. When you talk about Medicaid, don't talk about cuts, because that sounds like we're just defending the status quo. Talk about the cost of nursing home care. Talk about people who work 2 and 3 jobs and can't afford health care except for the Medicaid expansion under the Affordable Care Act. Talk about cost. And, even if you get a question about immigration, there's a reason why beef prices are going up. And it's not just that we're not getting imports from Mexico, and why milk and cheese prices are going up, because we're not getting dairy products from Canada. The tariffs are driving everything else, but you get a question about immigration. You got a lot of people who are not showing up for work at beef packing plants and chicken processing plants and agricultural workers in California who are not picking the vegetables because they don't want to be deported. So even if you get a question about immigration, go to cost, because of what they're doing. What he talked about was in the campaign was we're going to deport criminals. Everybody's for that, right? That's not what they're doing. They're threatening to deport anybody. Mm-hmm. And so people aren't showing up for work. By the way, that drives up housing costs too, because when construction workers don't show up, housing prices go up. We get 47% of our lumber from Canada. That's going up. So always stay in the cost lane. Always stay in the economic lane. Talk about Social Security. Talk about prices in the grocery store, and talk about the fact that the tariffs are a $3,800 a year tax on every single American who buys things. That's everybody. So you got to stay in the economic lane. And, you don't have to swing at every pitch. I said this in the Wall Street Journal today. Trump loves to talk about transgender issues, and he loves to talk about all these other things that are not where people are right now. They're trying to figure out, how do I afford my bill at the grocery store? Can I keep my mother in a nursing home? Can I afford my health care? Can I pay my rent? And if you're outside of the core economic stuff, you're ceding the ground to the Republicans, because they want to talk about all kinds of social issues that have not really helped our branding as a party. As much trouble as Trump is putting the Republicans in, and you saw it in the loss in Wisconsin, in what was a landslide, and what is usually a 1-point state.
1% victory in Wisconsin is a landslide. 10%, exactly. I don't even have words for.
Exactly. I mean, Tammy Baldwin is our client. She won by 30,000 votes out of over 3 million casts. So, like a 10-point win in Wisconsin, it all makes us feel good. Hey, we still have a Democratic branding problem where the Republican Party has about a 5 to 10 point advantage just on favorability of the two parties. And so the Democrats need to get back to being the party of working families. Mm-hmm. The way you do that is to relentlessly talk about the economy, the cost of goods in grocery stores, people losing their jobs because of a tariff policy that was proven in 1930 that it didn't work, and it doesn't work now.
There has been, like you talked about consumer confidence and how that usually presages a victory by the other party. Most of the people that I've been talking to seem reasonably confident that Democrats have a good shot at taking back the House of Representatives. But even though there are a lot of Republican senators up in the midterms, I've heard people say, well, those are deeply red states, so Democrats probably won't make much headway there. Do you agree with that?
Yes and no. I mean, what the interesting thing is that we're seeing is, look, the world made up their mind about Donald Trump a long time ago. His numbers are going to trade in a pretty narrow range on presidential job approval. So, I would ignore Trump's ratings, but people are upset and they want to take it out on somebody. And there's a lot of public polling out there that says they want to take it out on just about any Republican that's out there. So let me give you some numbers. So Iowa's 1st district, okay, the Republican incumbent is Marinette Miller Meeks. This is a district that Trump won by about 3 points in 2020. She won it by 0.2 of a point in 24. In a poll that's now about a month and a half old, Trump's fave on fave was 49-47, so +2. Marinette Miller Meeks, 25 favorable, 51 unfavorable. That's upside down 25 points. So in Trump country, which is what Iowa has become, you're talking about Zach Nunn, Marinette Miller Meeks, all these other folks. These Republicans have a huge target on their back. People are upset that they're not standing up for Iowa. They're not standing up for Trump. And it's happening in Pennsylvania. There are numbers. David Schweikert in Arizona won, who won by about 4 points last time. His numbers are upside down by 20 points. And then you start looking at the Senate races. The two easiest pickups for Democrats are North Carolina and Maine. Okay, so Tom Tillis in North Carolina. Okay, this is a state that Trump won by over 3 points. His approval is 25. His disapproval is 46. That's dead man walking numbers. And
well, he didn't help himself any when it became public that he promised that woman who went public about Pete Hegseth's former wife, and she said, right. Tom Tillis assured me that if I went public with this story, he would vote against Hegseth's nomination, and he didn't. And I don't know about the people from his state, but I think a lot of women are going to remember that.
Well, and they've already registered it. And Tillis already has a problem on his right. He's already got the reputation of being a Republican in name only. So he every once in a while will say something that sounds courageous, and then he'll run back between Donald Trump's legs and cower because he needs Trump to get through a Republican primary. Here's his problem. If he runs against Roy Cooper, who's our client, he's down 47-43, and these were numbers long before the stock market crashed. I'll give you one other set of numbers. This is Susan Collins in Maine, 24% favorable, 61% disapprove, and she's got a problem in her base too. So, you start looking at this, you can see a place where even if she runs, Collins is probably in the biggest peril that she's ever had. But this is such a profoundly volatile election because of the economy that I think Ohio's in play. And, it wasn't long ago, 2022, where we elected a Democrat statewide in Alaska. So, I think, you don't have to squint too hard to see 4 Senate seats in play and probably 25 or 30 seats in the House. Now, it's a year and a half until the election. That's
what I was just going to ask you about, because one Republican who was quoted. Yeah, one Republican who was quoted said, oh, well, if the midterms were held today, we'd be devastated. But we've got a year. Nobody's going to remember how they feel right now.
It may be true. Like we said, year and a half is an eternity in politics. But something has to happen to change things. Biden was that, we had the red wave that was going to come in 2022 and wipe out Democrats all over the ballot. And then we had a certain Supreme Court ruling. that basically left it to the states to outlaw abortion, and that changed that election on its head. So you never know when there's going to be one of those moments that completely change an election, because, 2022 on balance was a pretty good year for Democrats, mostly because of abortion and where the people were on the Supreme Court. We can't even guess at what event could be that moment that changes it. But if we stay on the basic trajectory now and the economy is still not working for people, 11 of the last 13 elections have been change elections. And basically you've got a chunk of voters out there who just keep hitting the change button. They're going to keep doing it until the economy starts working for everybody, or at least working for them.
Yeah. I'm joined by Democratic strategist Peter Giangreco. We are going to take a break and be back with more after this.
Take Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, with you on the go by using the TuneIn app on your phone. Just search for WCPT 820.
Because facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
By the way, if you want to read that article that Peter Giangreco is quoted in, the title, if you have to go to the politics section, but the headline is Democrats Bet Casting Trump as Agent of Chaos Will Boost Their Fortunes. And the lovely and talented Peter Giangreco is quoted in, I think it just posted today. Yes, it did just post today. Peter, the people who listen to this radio show tend to be a lot more interested in politics, a lot more interested in activism than the average person. And everybody wants to know now, what are the ways to be an effective activist? Marches, showing up at offices, witness slips, sending emails to your legislators. What would you tell people? What are the top one or two things they can do to bring about the change that we all want?
A couple of weeks ago, I would have said, go to Wisconsin and knock doors for the state Supreme Court race. We don't have any special elections that are coming down the pike anytime soon. So there's this period. I think what it is, there's some seats. We talked about Iowa 1. We talked about Iowa 3. That are going to Wisconsin 3, Wisconsin 1. That's the other, by the way, upside of the state Supreme Court race win is that the liberal 4-3 majority in the state Supreme Court redrew what were the most horrifically gerrymandered state house districts. Where you had Republicans had a veto-proof majority in both the Wisconsin Senate and the Assembly, even though Wisconsin is the closest state in the country, is 50-50 as you get. That map got thrown out. They drew a new map, and Democrats are going to be, could have the trifecta with Governor Evers and a majority in the Senate and the Assembly. So that state Supreme Court meant a lot to put this in position. I think they're going to redraw the congressional lines, and so you'll see Wisconsin 1, which is just over the line, Kenosha, Racine, parts of Milwaukee, and then stretching west to. I think you'll see that footprint push further into Milwaukee, and not as much into places like Walworth County. I think you'll see the 3rd district move closer to Madison, and get rid of some of the farmland that was dumped in there by the Republican majority. So I think you're going to see very competitive races in Wisconsin, in Iowa, in Michigan. And so I think you just got to lace up your traveling shoes and do what, folks in this who listen to your radio, I know they listen all over the place, but are mostly in Chicago. But, get ready to get involved in those races. We just went through spring elections here, so there's not a lot on the radar. But, what I would say is pick a district, even if you can't drive there and you can't knock on the door, just adopt it and say, I'm going to follow this race. I'm going to give $25 a month. I'm going to try to get my friends in that state. to get involved in the volunteer. So I would say, adopt a district is probably the way to go.
I like that. Hey, what do you think of Ken
Swing
Martin?
State Project is a good way to get them.
Yeah.
I've known Ken for years. The DFL has always been a high-functioning state party, the Democratic Farm Labor Party in Minnesota. That's the Democratic Party. We control every statewide office there. I think there's a one-seat majority in the Senate there. So, Minnesota is trending less Democratic. It is becoming a lot more like Wisconsin, where, up in the Iron Range, which we used to be heavily Democratic back in the day, you had a lot of, unionized miners and people working who were union members. A lot of those mines have closed. A lot of those folks are no longer there. And it has become as red as you can be. It's been offset by, a Democratic trend in places like Hennepin and Ramsey County, which are the suburbs around Minneapolis and St. Paul. So you have this concentration of Democratic vote in a couple of counties, and the rest of the state has become a really tough place. So Ken has has helped the party be dominant there for years, and I'm hoping that he brings that same kind of diligence of not only raising money at the top, but building the grassroots at the bottom. That's what they've always done at the DFL. The Democratic Party of Wisconsin, of course, is the gold standard, and they've done remarkable things. But Ken's been around for a long time, and I think we'll make sure that from an organizing perspective, that we're always thinking about how do we get troops on the ground, get volunteers involved, because that's how they've done it in Minnesota for years.
Well, one thing, he posted a video recently saying that he's been on a listening tour, he's been traveling around the United States, and he said very shortly you're going to start hearing about a people's cabinet, which is an idea that actually I've been reading about for many months now, this idea that because Trump's cabinet especially is so incompetent, that Democrats should find people with real areas of expertise in each of the areas that you would be overseeing as a cabinet member. And that when one of Trump's loons does something loony, you can go to your person and say, okay, how should it have been done? And basically use an expert to rebut what's happening. When I first heard about it, I thought that was an interesting idea. What do you think?
I think it's a good idea. I think that's a little out of reach for most people. What I found is more interesting is like in North Carolina, the last couple of cycles, they set as a goal to have someone run in every legislative seat in the state. And, coming from Illinois, that sounds like an easy proposition. In North Carolina, it has the worst. Now that the Wisconsin map is fair, North Carolina now has the worst legislative map in the country.
Those people, I don't know what the heck's going on in North Carolina, but it's awful.
I know they're about to steal a state Supreme Court seat that was one of our clients too, by just haphazard. They're going to throw out 65,000 mail-in ballots because they know mail-in ballots break Democratic. It is. There have been a lot of people who've used the word stealing votes and blah, blah, blah. And most of it's a lie on the right. This is the first time you're going to actually watch a judiciary steal an election for a party because and remember, before April 1st in the two special elections in Florida, the Republicans had a 3-seat majority in the House. Their entire majority was by winning the North Carolina State Supreme Court in the off year and redrawing the lines and drawing out 3 Democratic seats. So they essentially stole 3 seats through partisan redistricting done at the state Supreme Court. So if you're in a place where there aren't many Democrats, get on the ballot and run, because this could be one of those wave elections where we're going to win some state legislative seats in some very red places simply because somebody was on the ballot. And if you can get on the ballot and you can get 10, 20, 30 friends to knock doors with you in a legislative district, you can do more than just be a name on the ballot. You could actually run a real campaign, and you could push that margin by a point or two. And when if you've got the sale and you can hold it up, and there's a partisan win, you can go a long way. So really, I think put yourself on a plan where you're giving to a few candidates, just even if it's $10 a month. Get on those kind of programs, adopt a seat, run for office yourself. There's a ton that you can do to help build. I mean, even just cleaning up the voter rolls, registering, particularly young people, particularly young women to vote, and helping people in communities of color to register to vote is always a helpful thing. Even in Chicago, we just have such a transient population in places like the lakefront, south side, west side, southwest side, that just getting people to re-register after they move. Sometimes, if you cross jurisdiction, sometimes your registration doesn't follow with you. So, I think it's just the basic blocking and tackling where people can get involved. But pick a couple of congressional races that you're interested in, and make that $10 a month commitment, or go and run for school board, go and run for state rep in a place where it's hard to find a Democrat to run.
Yes, because there's a funny thing: if there's no Democrat on the ballot, there's no way a Democrat can win. Isn't it funny how that works? Yeah. Look, North Carolina, they've got the like I said, the most horribly gerrymandered legislative map in the country, and yet they found people to run in every single district. And that's what I think it's going to take, is a commitment towards fighting every fight, unlike the messaging part where there's not every time Donald Trump says he's going to run for a 3-term, we don't all have to freak out about it. Like, don't swing at that pitch, right? Yeah. But from an organizing standpoint, it's just the opposite. Fight every fight. Run every race, even if it's just a school board race, we got to have people running, because that's where a lot of these stealth right wingers got their starts. Peter, I know we only have about a minute left, and this is actually less than a minute. This is really unfair. Do you think Rahm Emanuel has a shot at the Senate seat if Dick Durbin retires?
No, because I don't think he wants it.
I think he wants to be governor? He's waiting for JB to move along?
I think so. He's an executive. I don't. Rahm is one of one in every room that he walks into. I don't think he could walk into the Senate and be one of 100. Like me.
Peter Giangreco, thank you so much for joining us today. Sure. It has been wonderful. I love talking with you, Peter. Thank you.
Oh, and there's one number I forgot.
Sure.
1,957.
Okay.
The days that it's been since Ohio State has beaten Michigan.
Oh, I'm sorry. This conversation's gone on a little too long. Lady B, cut him off. Cut him off now. That's going to do it for me. Peter Giangreco, we don't need to hear anything more from him. He's a bad man, and I can't remember why I invited him to be on the radio. Must have been a brain fart. I will see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Get your dialing finger ready. Remember, for the first half of the show, we talk about the news of the day, and I want to hear what you think about what's going on in the world. Take care, my friends. Find something to do tonight that brings you joy. I'll see you tomorrow at 2. Good night.